Hello and welcome to today's session. Today we are beginning to discuss the play by Eugene O'Neill, The Emperor Jones. So we had begun talking about it and how the transformation from melodramatic techniques towards more realist and more expressionist techniques had begun to happen from the turn of the century, from the later 19th century onwards, and began to be more pronounced in the early 20th century. So Eugene O'Neill began to experiment with the techniques of expressionism and realism from the early decades of the 20th century itself. And The Emperor Jones is one of his best known plays. So this play was originally was not performed first in Broadway, but it became very soon became a huge that was received very well, became a huge hit that it very soon began to be performed massively in Broadway itself. So the kind of success that the drama, the textual production, and the performance received was immense, given that it was dealing with a range of themes which was very pertinent, very politically relevant to American society, to the nation itself. And at the same time, it wasn't the kind of themes which were usually dealt with in the in the context of these artistic representations. So, The Emperor Jones is a play, a drama in 8 scenes. So, it primarily deals with the theme of debased humanity. So, there are multiple characters. There's a black character who's a protagonist, and there's also a white character who is like a companion, but in with the mixed emotions. So, who's a white person as well. So, through these different characters, the lead characters, and also the mob characters, we begin to get an insight into the psychological journey of individuals depending on their situations and depending on the kind of locations that they inhabit. It could be racial, it could be gendered, it could be based on their the domicile, based on their nationality. So the identity, the questions of identity, the questions of belonging, and more importantly, the question of collective memory and individual memory coming together to create a plot structure, to create sort of a new theme that becomes very important in this play. So this is expressionist and realist at the same time, and we do have an unreliable narrator at work over here, and there are also multiple points of view coming in. So this is a kind of play, it's a kind of drama which requires a close reading from the reader, and it also takes us through this the varied trajectories of human emotions, about the way an individual thinks, and the kind of context, the political, socio-cultural context that would come into play when a person is making a decision, when a person is experiencing a variety of emotions which are also contesting in nature. So this is very loosely based on an event in Haitian history, and we will perhaps talk a bit more about it when we get into some of the finer details in the play. So the protagonist is Brutus Jones. He is the Emperor Jones here, and he's a former Pullman porter, and he had escaped from prison from America, and now he is in a Caribbean island when this the play begins. So he comes across as a character who is immensely powerful and who also manipulates the superstitious beliefs of the native inhabitants of the island in order to rule over them. So he is the emperor of that island, and he establishes a power structure in multiple ways, largely by manipulating them, but also by compromising certain ideals of humanity that he has in himself. So this is about abuse of power, about the hierarchical power structures that get inhabited, about the hierarchical power structures that get established within that province, within that location. It's also about racial memories. It's also about how this collective memory of race, coupled with the individual experiences that Brutus Jones had in America, how that sort of triggers emotions in him, and how that has a bearing on the kind of decisions that he takes, and how that memory, along with his desire for power, they work together, and it's almost like a fatal combination, as you would begin to see. So the play throughout it assumes a very dark tone. There is something very sinister about the setting, about the descriptions, and about the immediate background, about the memories. Yeah, so it is a very very fascinating journey through the different phases of human emotions and through different phases of human history. So there was the other title, which was originally meant for the Emperor Jones, was the Silver Bullet. It's a metaphorical presence. The silver bullet is a metaphorical presence in the play. Emperor Jones, Brutus Jones, manages to convince the superstitious natives that he could be killed only with a silver bullet. So the silver bullet is a metaphorical constant presence in this play from scene one onwards, and we find that it also operates as this a safety net, almost a pseudo safety net for Jones, at least for some time. So it's also a symbol of the kind of tropes that could be used to convince people to believe in certain things quite against rationality, and how that belief also becomes a foil, how that belief also becomes a fence within which a character like Brutus Jones continues to operate. So we will now start looking at the play, and we will pay attention to some of the aspects which are getting foregrounded in scene one itself. So we are being introduced to the characters over here. The characters are Brutus Jones, who is the Emperor Jones himself, Henry Smithers, who's a Cockney trader, a white man who is stuck in this world, in this Caribbean island, an old native woman who enters the scene and who is primarily responsible for letting us know what is happening at the beginning of the play. And there's Lem, who's a native chief, a set of soldiers who are also adherents of this native chief, Lem. The little formless fears who are also personified as characters. Yeah, so the formless fears, Jeff, the Negro convicts, the prison guard, the planters. So they are all minor characters, but they are also very important in bringing out some of the emotions and also giving an outline and a kind of a shape to the kind of giving an outline to the kind of person that Brutus Jones is. The auctioneer, the slaves, the Congo witch doctor, yeah, so they are all minor but very, very significant characters over here. And this is how the play begins. So there are, when we read through this play, you will realize that Eugene O'Neill has given very extensive descriptions. This is for the reader to be able to imagine the setting. And in this setting, in his descriptions, we find that there's a lot of subjective elements that come into play too. So which is why the unreliability in this drama, it works at multiple levels. The unreliability works also through the voice that the narrator lends itself to this play. We are being led, the audience, the readers are being led to think in certain ways and to fit within certain frameworks when we are trying to understand the setting, when we are trying to analyze the characters. So this is how the scene one opens. So the scene one, the description goes like this. The audience chamber in the palace of the emperor, a spacious, high-ceilinged room with a bare, whitewashed walls. The floor is of white tiles. In the rear, to the left of the center, a wide archway giving out on a portico with white pillars. The palace is evidently situated on high ground, for beyond the portico nothing can be seen but a vista of distant hills. It's a room which is very barely furnished. The room is bare of furniture, with the exception of one huge chair made of uncut wood, which stands at center. Its back to rear. This is very apparently the emperor's throne, which belongs to Brutus Jones, obviously. It's painted a dazzling eye, smiting scarlet. There's a brilliant orange cushion on the seat. Another smaller one is placed on the floor to serve as a footstool. Strips of matting dyed scarlet led from the foot of the throne to the two entrances. So there is a very, very strong and solid presence of whiteness when the play begins. There are these, whitewashed walls, white pillars, and it is, there are white. There are also white tiles. So there is a certain whiteness which begins to stare at our face from the beginning. So this play at some level is also very ironically situated in this white world, which isn't temporally white, but the systems which are being replicated over here, the kind of judiciary which is being challenged over here, the moral systems which are being replicated as well as challenged, they all belong to the white world. So this is something that we will keep coming back to, this point that we will keep coming back to, we'll keep revisiting when we are going through this play. The kind of memory that Brutus Jones has, the kind of recollections that he has. So it also needs to be mentioned over here that the play operates mostly in flashbacks, and some of the times we get an insight into the past through the articulations of the characters, and sometimes it is there, from the kind of things that they remember very vaguely. So there is a reconstruction that would be happening at every stage of this play, with the reader trying to reconstruct the story of Brutus Jones's past. That story, that past is very much mapped into a white world, because this is where he lives in America for the longest time until he is convicted as a criminal and he jumps jail. Those are the details that we will very soon come across in the play itself. So when the curtain rises, a native Negro woman sneaks in cautiously from the entrance on the right. There's a description of the woman who's very old, who's barefooted, and we find that there's something very vulnerable, very weak, very submissive about her. And Smithers makes his entrance too. So look at the way in which Smithers is being described over here. He's a tall, stoop-shouldered man about 40. His bald hair perched on a long neck with an enormous Adam's apple, looks like an egg. The tropics have tanned his naturally pasty face with its small sharp features to a sickly yellow. So he's a white man, we get to know. And native rum has painted his pointed nose to a startling red. His little washy blue eyes are red-rimmed and dart about him like a ferret. His expression is one of unscrupulous meanness. So very little is left to our imagination at this point. We are being told, that the readers are being very directly told about the unscrupulous meanness that Smithers has, which also, unveils itself in so many ways from the beginning. And he's cowardly and dangerous as well. So this is the kind of fatal combination that is being attributed to Smithers. He's unscrupulously mean, he's cowardly and dangerous, which is why, he does not have a problem in doing certain reckless things over the course of this play. He's dressed in a worn riding suit of dirty white drill, puttees, spurs, and wears a white cock helmet. So you do see these whiteness coming back in different forms, in settings, in behavior, in these recollections, in certain symbols. A cartridge belt with an automatic revolver is around his waist. He carries a riding whip in his hand. He sees the woman and stops to watch her suspiciously. Then, making up his mind, he steps quickly on tiptoe into the room. The woman, looking back over her shoulder continually, does not see him until it is too late, which also means that the woman perhaps had been trying not to show her face to him. When she does, Smithers springs forward and grabs her firmly by the shoulder. She struggles to get away, fiercely but silently. So this is, this sets up, there's a conversation which begins between Smithers and this old woman. And so we get to know about the kind of relationship which is the hierarchical relationship, which is over here. The woman is trying to perhaps, sneak away, and Smithers has caught hold of her. So look at the kind of language that he begins to use with the woman. What are you sneaking away for? Been stealing a bit, I suppose. Yeah. So there is this is a relationship which is also based on mistrust. So we know that. Throughout this play, that's another thing which comes across as very, very interesting. Even the characters who are always dealing with each other in very close quarters, what dominates more than anything else is a feeling of distrust, which is there between most of the characters, including between Emperor Jones and Smithers himself too. Then, of course, the woman says she's not there to steal, and Smithers begins to swear at her. Bloody liar, tell me what's up. There's something funny going on. I smelled it in the air first. I smelled it in the air first thing I got up this morning. You blacks are up to some devilment. This palace of is like a bleeding tomb. Yeah. So this dichotomy, the racial dichotomy, the moral dichotomy, the kind of tension, the relationship of mistrust, it is very clear over here. So here is a white man who's caught in a certain world, which where he does not organically, where he does not automatically belong, but he certainly has a superior stance over here as of now, as we are seeing this. And this is how he begins to swear at this woman by referring to her as the you blacks, which also gives us a sense of a larger group over there, where making him, forcing him to address them as you blacks. And of course, from the description and the way this this conversation is proceeding, we get to know that Smithers is a white man too. So the woman is beginning to, in very broken sentences, she is beginning to, tell Smithers that they all have gone away. They all go, they all go. She makes a sweeping gesture towards the hills in the distance. So here, even without the woman saying much, Smithers figures it out. He's asking whether they ran away to the hills. Yes, mister. Him, Emperor, great father. She touches the forehead to the floor with a quick mechanical jerk. Him sleep after 8, then they go, all go. Me old woman, me left only, now me go too. Yeah, so we get a sense of the picture, the scene, the opening scene. So the Emperor Jones and the Emperor he went to sleep after eating, and all the others, they fled to the hills. And only this old woman is left behind. She will very soon disappear as well. So Smithers, his astonishment giving way to an immense mean satisfaction. Yeah. So the kind of emotions that goes through Smithers' mind, it's very interesting. Yeah. He is he comes across as a very close ally to Jones, but at the same time, he also gets a lot of satisfaction when something really wicked happens, when things begin to go wrong for Jones. So because he's also placed in this in-between world, unable to choose a side, because he does not fit in anywhere. He knows that at some level there is a moral, hierarchical, racial superiority that he has, but at the same time, the settings within which he finds himself, they do not allow him to articulate or execute or perform any of those forms of superiority. So, oh, that's the ticket. Well, I know bloody well what's in the air when they run off to the hills. So this is something that he had been expecting. So there is a surprise, there's a sense of surprise, but he's also, has a satisfaction, a very mean satisfaction, which is why right at the beginning we were told that, he's cowardly and mean at the same time. So we are again being told that the emperor is asleep, and Smithers says, yeah, he will anyway find out as soon as he wakes up, and he's also cunning enough to know when his times come. Yeah. So this is something inevitable is happening when the scene opens. Something for which we don't know how well prepared they are, but the way the dialogue is progressing, we get to know that this is an inevitable thing which was bound to happen. So the surprise element is very limited here as well. So Smithers threatens to shoot this woman, and she also disappears from the scene. And now we find Jones entering. And look at the description given to Jones and contrast that with the description given to Smithers. Jones enters from the right. He's a tall, powerfully built, full-blooded Negro of middle age. His features are typically Negroid, yet there is something decidedly distinctive about his face. So this is very interesting, the typical Negroid features that the author here is talking about. An underlying strength of will, a hardy, self-reliant confidence in himself that inspires respect. Yeah, so very clearly, the tone and the vocabulary used for describing Jones is very different from that of the tone and vocabulary used for describing Smithers. His eyes are alive with a keen, cunning intelligence. In manner, he's shrewd, suspicious, evasive. He wears a light blue uniform, cold sprayed with brass buttons, heavy gold chevrons on his shoulders. So so he's powerfully dressed as well. Everything conveys something, everything about him, his demeanor, his stature, the way he dresses up, everything conveys something about the position and the power that he is wielding. His pants are bright red with a light blue stripe down the side, patent leather laced boots with brass spurs, and a belt with a long barreled pearl-headed revolver in a holster complete his makeup. Yet there's something not altogether ridiculous about his grandeur. he has a way of carrying it off. So that is very important over here. Here is a black man who has been invested with a great degree of power in that setting. He dresses accordingly as well. He's very strongly built and typically Negroid. There is, this is the racial description over here, the racial representations over here. That's something, perhaps we will come back to talk about a bit more later on. There is something very biased and internalized about these descriptions as well. But nevertheless, we find that at the outset, when scene 1 opens in The Emperor Jones, the way the character of Smithers is being described and the way Brutus Jones is being described, it's in complete contrast to each other. We find that Jones is clearly the protagonist over here in terms of his emotion, in terms of the way he presents himself and the kind of power that he wields in this within this particular system to which we are yet to be introduced to. So Jones is also irritated because there's no one around when he woke up, and he hears this whistle, and this was a whistle that Smithers was whistling when the woman was running away. So who dare wake up the emperor? And look at the way in which he's referring to himself. Yeah, here's a man who is very conscious about the kind of power he has, and he makes sure that he performs that power too. So power and the way it gets performed in these particular settings, that's very important in this drama as well. We will continue to witness power getting performed in various ways. It's gendered, it's racial, it is also specific to the context, the setting, the immediate settings inhabited by the characters. And we find that it changes radically depending on the sociocultural setting. So Smithers, the descriptions within the bracket, within which tells us sometimes stage direction, sometimes the kind of expressions and the emotions that the characters are supposed to feel, they give us a lot of clue. They give us a lot of clue about the nuances, about the kind of subtleties which exist, which operate between the characters. Smithers showing himself in a manner half afraid and half defiant. So this in-betweenness is very important. We will find that Smithers continues to come across as a character who has these mixed emotions about Jones, and his feelings are always mixed. It keeps oscillating between these extreme forms of emotions. He resents Jones, absolutely no doubt about that, but he also adores him, and both are very genuine emotions. Yeah, he's not a well-wisher, but at the same time, he's an ally in everything that Jones does. So Jones putting on his suave manner, which fails to cover up his contempt for the white man. So both of them, we find that it's a very problematic relationship. They're companions. They're there together, trying to rule over the natives, take advantage of them, make money, manipulate them. They also have their own system, their own order within that world, which is very away, physically away, and in every other systemically away from America. But this is very problematic, the kind of emotions that they have for each other and the kind of relationship that they share. Smithers, when they are interacting for the first time, he's half afraid and half defiant, and Jones is trying to cover up the contempt that he feels for the white man. So we find the racial order, the hierarchical order getting reversed over here. And this tension remains, this tension is at the heart of this play, is there at the core of this play. So he sits down on his throne with easy dignity. And whenever Jones is being talked about, though his actions are not being entirely justified, there is a confidence about him. He's a man who's sure of himself. And in this setting, he's at his finest self as far as his personality is concerned. So Smithers is about to disclose the news that all his subjects, they all have, as the woman informed, they all have run away to the hills. So Smithers is building up this conversation, and he's also enjoying his discomfort because he clearly senses that Jones is intelligent enough to know that something is not right, something is going wrong over here, and Smithers is trying to build this up in a very dramatic way, also enjoying the discomfort that this is causing Jones. So Did you don't you notice nothing funny today? No, I perceived nothing of the kind. So then Smithers comes straight to the point, and he asks very sarcastically. So these emotions and this tone is very important. He asks very sarcastically, "Where's all your court?" The generals and the cabinet ministers and all. So clearly, this is a system that they have devised. Yeah, it is not an approved sort of a governmental system. It's not a kingdom in the usual sense of the term. He's a self-declared emperor, and this is a hierarchy. And these are the positions that they have devised to suit themselves. So the sarcasm is not misplaced at all over here. And Jones, he continues to maintain his cool, where they mostly runs the minute I closes my eyes, drinking rum and talking big down in town. How come you don't know that? Yeah. So here's an insinuation here. Jones is also implying that Smithers is also usually party to them when they are drinking and partying. And the moment he's also aware that the moment he goes to take a nap, they are all doing things their own way. And this is something. This knowledge is interesting at the beginning because on the one hand, he is trying to be a tyrannical ruler over here. He has imposed his rule over them. He is taking advantage of their superstitious beliefs, but at the same time, he is aware of these some of these silly petty things that they do behind his back, and he allows them to do it as well. He's aware of it, and he knows that Smithers is also sort of party to it, but he chooses to not to make, he always chose not to make an issue out of it. And this knowledge that the audience has now, and this relationship that he has always maintained with his subjects, that is very interesting because he also knew where to draw this line. He also knew that this is something very temporary that could come to an end any point, and he's also very careful. The human in him is very careful not to trigger, not to provoke them beyond a point, because he's just there to get things done in a way that suits him best as well. So Smithers is obviously offended at this, but he pretends to get over it, and they do have this conversation, which takes us back to a few years. We get a glimpse into the kind of people they are, into the kind of men they are, and the kind of past that they share. There is a history over here which obviously leads them to, which makes them, almost forces them to tolerate each other. They need each other because they all have come with some baggage, and we get some glimpse into it. So in a very, very technical sense, this is the kind of flashbacks and the individual memory which will keep recurring in this drama, so as to give a sense of what happened to the characters before they reached where they are now. So it would be possible to say that the opening of this play, it's in this very appropriate setting where the power that the palace, this space, wields is about to give away, and he is at this threshold, and we get to know of what happened before that through these series of recollections and flashbacks and these snippets of conversation, and we will get to know about what lies ahead and as and when the action progresses as well. So the play certainly happens in this in this in between time, in this the liminal twilight time over here.